The great chamber of the Galactic Council was older than most stars. Its walls were made of crystal that had been grown over thousands of years, and light moved through them like slow rivers. 700 species had seats in this chamber. Some were made of flesh. Some were made of light. Some were things that had no name in any language except their own. Today the chamber was full. Every seat was taken. The air hummed with translators working in 10,000 languages at once. Ambassador Kethra of the Veloxi hegemony stood at the central platform. He was tall, even for his kind. His body was covered in hard plates the color of old bronze, and his forearms were folded behind his back in the formal posture of respect. He had served the council for 300 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had negotiated treaties that saved billions of lives, but today his hands were shaking. "I come before this council," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves, "to make a formal petition. I request that the species known as humanity be reclassified from observation status to full military participation rights." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, slowly, things began to happen. A delegation of gaspings from the outer ring simply floated out of the chamber without a word. The thought forms of Keth, creatures of pure silicon and light, dimmed their presence until they were barely visible. The ancient Yulkith, who had not spoken in 2 centuries, made a sound that the translators could only render as unfortunate. Ambassador Kethra had expected resistance. He had not expected fear. High Arbiter Yolmesh rose from the central throne. The Arbiter was old beyond measure. A being of crystalline light that had guided the council since before most species had discovered fire. When they spoke, their voice came from everywhere at once. "The petition is denied." Kethra stepped forward. "With respect, High Arbiter, I must ask for an explanation. Humanity has been a spacefaring civilization for only 300 years. They control a mere 47 star systems. They have never started a war of aggression. By every measure, they are a minor power. Why are they the only species in 10,000 years of galactic history to be permanently excluded from warfare?" The Arbiter's light flickered. For a long moment, they said nothing. "You are young, Ambassador," Yolmesh finally said. "You joined the council after the ban was enacted. You do not know what we know." "You did not see what we saw, then show me," Kethra said. "Show everyone. If humanity is so dangerous that they must be excluded forever, then surely the council deserves to know why." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Other ambassadors were nodding. The question had been asked many times over the years, never so directly, never so publicly. The Arbiter was silent for a long time. Then they raised one hand, and a section of the chamber wall went dark. A moment later, it began to glow with the light of a holographic recording. "Very well," Yolmesh said. "You wish to understand? Then you will learn of the Krethfell incident. You will see what humanity did when they were first tested. And you will understand why, in all my long existence, I have never been more afraid of any species in the galaxy." The recording began to play. The timestamp was 2847 CE by the human calendar. The location was the Krethfell system, a small cluster of planets near the border between 3 major powers. The conflict was listed as a minor territorial dispute, the kind that happened a dozen times a year across the galaxy. Expected duration: 6 standard days. Expected casualties: minimal. Expected outcome: negotiated settlement. The recording showed the initial attack. The Dominion of Rith, a proud warrior empire of reptilian beings, had decided to expand their territory by claiming a small human mining colony. They sent a fleet of 200 warships. It's more than enough to overwhelm any defense the humans could mount. It was a standard operation. The Rith would arrive, demonstrate their superior force, and the humans would surrender. There would be some negotiation, some exchange of resources, and life would go on. This was how civilized species resolved disputes. This was how it had always been done. The Rith fleet arrived in perfect formation. Their ships were beautiful in the cold way of weapons, all sharp angles and gleaming metal. Their admiral, a scarred veteran named Kortheveld, broadcast the formal declaration of intent. He gave the humans 1 hour to surrender. 40 minutes later, 17 ships appeared on the edge of the system. Kethra leaned forward. 17 ships. Against 200? They were not even warships. They were patrol craft, small vessels designed for border monitoring and light escort duty. They had weapons, but nothing that could threaten a proper military fleet. The Rith Admiral laughed when he saw them. His officers laughed with him. This would be even easier than expected. Then the human commander opened a communication channel. Everything changed. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was 43 years old. She had served in the human fleet for 20 years, mostly in quiet postings far from any conflict. She had never commanded anything larger than a patrol group. She was smiling. "Admiral Korthavel," she said, her voice light and pleasant. "Thank you for coming. We've been expecting you." Yeah, the Admiral's laughter died. There was something in her tone that his instincts did not like. "You have been expecting to die?" He asked. "Oh no," Commander Chen said. "We've been expecting to have a conversation. You see, I've been studying your people for a long time. Fascinating culture. Very hierarchical. Very focused on honor and proper form. It's really quite beautiful in its own way." She paused, and her smile grew wider. "It's also very fragile. And I think, Admiral, that you and I are going to discover just how fragile together." The recording showed the Rith fleet beginning to move into attack formation. 200 warships against 17 patrol craft. The outcome should have been certain. The timestamp showed the battle lasted for hours. At the end of those 4 hours, the Rith Dominion had lost not a single ship. Their fleet was intact. Their soldiers were unharmed, and they had surrendered unconditionally. The recording paused. In the council chamber, no one moved. No one spoke. "This, High Arbiter," Yolmesh said quietly, "was the first time we truly saw what humans were capable of. And this, young ambassador, was only the beginning." Kethra stared at the frozen image of Commander Chun's smiling face. His translator was working overtime, trying to find words for emotions his species had never needed to name. "What did she do?" he asked. "How is this possible?" The Arbiter's light dimmed with something that looked almost like weariness. "She did what humans always do," Yolmesh said. "She refused to play by the rules. And in doing so, she showed us that our rules were never as solid as we believed." The recording began to play again, and Ambassador Kethra watched as everything he knew about warfare began to fall apart. The recording continued, and the council watched in silence. Commander Sarah Chen did not order her ships to attack. She did not raise shields or charge weapons. Instead, she did something that the Rith Admiral could not understand. She ordered her 17 patrol craft to accelerate, directly toward the enemy fleet at maximum speed, not in attack formation, not with weapons ready. They flew in a scattered pattern that made no tactical sense at all, and as they flew, they began broadcasting music on every open frequency. The Rith communications officers reported the signal with confusion. It was some kind of human audio transmission, rhythmic, loud. The translators struggled to make sense of the words. Something about not stopping believing. Something about a city by a bay. Admiral Korthavel ordered his fleet to prepare for combat, but the human ships were not attacking. They were weaving between his warships like small fish swimming through a reef. They were not firing. They were not even slowing down. They were heading directly for his flagship. "Fire on them," the Admiral ordered. His weapons officers tried. But the human ships were too fast, too unpredictable. They moved in patterns that the targeting computers could not follow. For every shot that came close, the humans had already changed direction 3 times, and still the music played. Louder now. More channels. Commander Chen's voice cut through the noise. "Admiral, I'm going to be honest with you. Your weapons are impressive. Your ships are beautiful. But I've noticed something interesting about your fleet." The Admiral said nothing. His officers were scrambling to get a targeting lock. "You have no internal security," Chen continued. "No guards on your bridges. No locks on your doors. Do you know why I find that so interesting? The first human ship reached the flagship. It did not fire. It did not ram. Instead, it matched speed with the massive warship and extended a boarding tube. Admiral Korthovel stared at his tactical display. He did not understand what he was seeing. Boarding actions had not been used in space combat for 6,000 years. The very idea was absurd. Why would anyone send soldiers onto an enemy ship when you could simply destroy it from a safe distance? Because, Chen said, answering a question he had not asked, it means you have absolutely no idea what to do when someone like me walks through your front door. The boarding tube connected. The seal activated. And 11 human Marines, wearing light combat suits and carrying weapons that looked almost primitive, stepped onto the most powerful warship in the Rith Dominion. They met no resistance. There was no resistance to meet. The Rith had not posted guards because guards were unnecessary. No one boarded ships. It simply was not. Dun Commander Chen walked through the corridors of the enemy flagship as if she owned it. Her Marines fanned out behind her, securing each section with quiet efficiency. They did not kill anyone. They did not need to. The Rith crew members they encountered simply stared at them in shock. Some tried to fight with tools or bare hands. The Marines subdued them gently, almost apologetically, and moved on. It took 12 minutes for Commander Chen to reach the bridge. Admiral Korthovel was waiting for her. He stood in front of his command chair, his scales flushed dark with rage. His officers flanked him, but none of them had weapons. Why would bridge officers carry weapons? This is an outrage, the Admiral said. This is a violation of every law of war. You will be executed for this. Chen smiled. She walked past him, examined his command chair with apparent interest, and then sat down in it. The Admiral was still standing next to her. He had not moved. Nice chair, she said. Very comfortable. Now, Admiral, let's talk about your fleet. She pulled out a small data pad and began typing. The main screen of the bridge flickered and changed. Instead of tactical displays, it now showed a document. Financial records. Personal communications. Private files, the Admiral's private files. I've been reading about you, Chen said conversationally. Did you know that your government keeps very detailed records? I found them fascinating. For example, did you know that your supply minister has been stealing from military budgets for the past 15 years? Or that your second die in command has been sending reports about your tactical decisions to your political rivals? The Admiral's scales went pale, or Chen continued. That your own communications include several messages where you describe the High Council as, and I quote, incompetent eggsuckers who wouldn't know strategy if it bit them on the tail. The bridge was silent. The Admiral's officers were staring at him with expressions that ranged from shock to barely hidden satisfaction. Chen stood up from the chair and walked to the communication console. Now, I'm going to broadcast these files to your entire fleet, and to the other 2 powers in this system, and to the news networks back on your homeworld. Unless... She paused, letting the word hang in the air. Unless what? The Admiral asked. His voice was barely a whisper. Unless you surrender, unconditionally. Right now. And then we're going to have a nice long conversation about how the Rith Dominion is going to change its policies regarding human territories. Admiral Korthovel was a veteran of 40 years. He had won a dozen battles. He had faced death many times. But he had never faced anything like this. He surrendered. But Commander Chen was not finished. Over the next 2 hours, she broadcast selected files to 3 of the Rith captains she had identified as politically ambitious. She offered them deals. Better positions. More power. Protection from the fallout that was about to consume their Admiral. 3 captains defected to her. Side, she then contacted 4 other ships and released information about their captains' mistakes and failures. Within an hour, 2 of those ships had active mutinies. The other 2 had captains who were desperately trying to negotiate their own surrenders. And then, as a final gesture, she challenged the Rith War Minister to personal combat, not a ship battle, not a fleet engagement. She challenged him to a physical fight, one-on-one. Broadcast live to every screen in the Dominion, the War Minister accepted. He was twice her size. He had claws that could tear through metal. He had been trained in combat since birth. The fight lasted 4 minutes. Commander Chen broke his thorax in 11 places. She did it methodically, efficiently, and with a running commentary that the translation systems broadcast to every Rith citizen watching. "This is for the miners on Krethville Station," she said with the first blow. "This is for the families who had to evacuate." Second blow. "This is for thinking you could take what wasn't yours." Third blow. When it was over, she stood over the broken war minister and looked directly into the broadcast camera. "The Rith Dominion will withdraw from human space," she said. "You will pay reparations for the damage caused. And you will remember this day, because next time, I won't be so gentle." The recording paused. In the council chamber, Ambassador Kethra realized he had forgotten to breathe. This High Arbiter Yolmesh said softly was the Krethvel incident. A battle won without firing a single shot. An empire humiliated by 17 patrol craft, and one human who simply refused to fight the way wars are supposed to be fought. Kethra's voice was unsteady. Surely this was an exceptional case? One brilliant commander does not represent an entire species. The Arbiter's light flickered with what might have been dark amusement. "That," Yolmesh said, "is exactly what we believed. So we invited humanity to participate in the formal war games, where rules would constrain them, where their creativity could be properly managed." The Arbiter paused. "We were very, very wrong." The archive shifted to a new set of recordings. The timestamp showed several years after the Krethville incident. The location was the tournament grounds. It's a massive artificial sphere where the great powers of the galaxy settled their disputes through controlled combat. Ambassador Ketra knew the tournament grounds well. Every civilized species did. For thousands of years, the formal war games had prevented true wars. When nations disagreed, they sent fleets to the tournament. They fought under strict rules. They accepted the results. It was orderly. It was predictable. It was safe. The Council had decided to invite humanity to participate. Surely, they reasoned, within proper rules, humans could be managed. Their creativity was impressive, but rules existed for a reason. The weight of galactic tradition would constrain them. The first regulated engagement was designed to be a test. The humans were given older ships, outdated technology. They were outnumbered 3-1. The rules were simple: disable enemy vessels, capture objectives, minimize casualties. Standard tournament conditions: Admiral Jackson Torres commanded the human fleet. He was younger than Commander Chen, with an easy smile and a relaxed manner that made other species nervous. He listened politely as the tournament officials explained the rules. He nodded at all the right moments. He asked thoughtful questions about the scoring system. Then the battle began, and everything went wrong. The humans did not engage in ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they retreated to a dense asteroid field and began modifying their vessels. The tournament officials watched with confusion as the humans dismantled parts of their own ships. "What are they doing?" the head official asked. No one knew. 3 hours later, the human fleet emerged from the asteroids. Their ships looked different now. Strange modifications had been made to their exhaust systems. New tanks had been welded to their hulls. They flew directly toward the enemy fleet and released their cargo. It was not weapons fire. It was not missiles. It was a cloud of fine particles that spread through space like fog. The particles were too small to trigger defensive systems. They passed through shields. It's like water through cloth, and they itched. The particles were a modified version of a compound from Earth, something called capsaicin. Humans used it in their food. To most other species, it caused an intense irritation that no amount of scratching could relieve. Within 6 hours, the enemy fleet was in chaos. Soldiers could not focus on their duties. Pilots could not concentrate on flying. Engineers could not work on their systems. The itching was everywhere, their scales and their fur and their sensory membranes. The tournament officials demanded an explanation. Admiral Torres provided one with a cheerful smile. "The rules prohibit weapons of mass destruction," he said. "But this isn't destruction. It's just discomfort. Very, very intense discomfort." I checked the rules 3 times. There's nothing in there about making the enemy uncomfortable. The enemy fleet surrendered after 3 days. Not because they were defeated, because they could not stop scratching long enough to fight. The council was disturbed. They modified the rules for the second regulated engagement. This time, humans would be restricted to defensive positions only. They could not attack. They could only defend a single asteroid base against an overwhelming force. Admiral Torres accepted the assignment without complaint. He requested 1 standard week to prepare his defenses. The tournament officials agreed. How much could anyone accomplish in 1 week? They underestimated humans again. When the attacking coalition arrived, they found the asteroid transformed. It was no longer a simple military outpost. It was a city, a marketplace, a center of commerce that had somehow established trade. Relationships with 17 different species in 7 days. The human defenders had not built weapons. They had built restaurants, entertainment venues, trading posts. They had imported goods from across the galaxy and were selling them at prices that undercut every major market. The attacking soldiers received their orders: assault the asteroid and capture it. But first, many of them decided they would try this thing called pizza. The first desertion happened on day 3. A young officer from the Coalition fleet simply did not return to his ship after visiting the asteroid. He had found a job at a human restaurant. The pay was good. The food was better. He sent a message to his commander explaining that he was no longer interested in warfare. By day 14, the Coalition had lost 300 soldiers to desertion. Not casualties. Desertion. They had walked away from their post to live on the human asteroid, drawn by the promise of good food, fair wages, and something the humans called work-life balance. By day 30, the Coalition's economy was destabilizing. Human traders had somehow gained control of key supply chains. Prices were fluctuating wildly. 3 stellar nations were facing currency crises because their soldiers would rather buy human goods than fight. The Coalition withdrew. Not because they were defeated, because continuing the siege was bankrupting them. The Council was now genuinely alarmed. They created the third regulated engagement with a single purpose: remove every advantage humans might have. No ships, no technology, no trade goods. Humans would be given only basic life support equipment and 1 week to prepare. Admiral Torres listened to the rules with the same cheerful attention as before. He asked 1 question: "Can we bring personal items?" The officials saw no harm in this. "Yes," they said. Within reason. 1 week later, the humans emerged from their preparation zone. They were not carrying advanced weapons. They were not wearing powered armor. They were dressed in metal suits. They carried swords. They had shields made of beaten steel. They had bows that fired wooden arrows. They had jars of dark powder that smelled like rotten eggs. The opposing force was the thought forms of Keth, beings of pure silicon and light. They were ancient, powerful, and completely confident. Their technology was beyond anything humans could match. Their weapons could destroy ships. Their shields could stop any attack. They had never, in their entire existence as a species, encountered fire. The first human attack used the dark powder. It exploded with a roar and a flash of brilliant orange light. The thought forms recoiled. Their sensory arrays, designed to process the subtle energies of the universe, were overwhelmed by the crude violence of combustion. Then came the arrows, their tips wrapped in burning cloth. Then came the torches. Then came something the humans called a flamethrower. The thought forms of Keth were silicon-based. They did not burn. Fire could not hurt them physically, but fire was chaos. Fire was destruction without purpose. Fire was everything their ordered existence was not. To witness fire, to experience its heat and light and random hunger, was to confront something that should not exist. The thought forms broke. Not physically, mentally, spiritually. They fled the battlefield, streaming back to their home world, broadcasting distress signals that the translators could only render as wrongness, Fundamental wrongness. Their entire species required for years of collective therapy before they could function. Normally again, Admiral Torres watched them go. His expression was not triumphant. It was almost sad. "I didn't want to do that," he told the tournament officials afterward. "But you took away every other option. When you remove all the civilized ways to win, you're left with the uncivilized ones. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago. We were hoping we wouldn't have to teach it to anyone else." The recording paused. In the council chamber, the silence was heavy with fear. High Arbiter Yolmesh S-Light had dimmed to almost nothing. 3 engagements, the Arbiter said. 3 complete victories. Not through superior firepower. Not through greater numbers. Through pure, terrifying creativity, they found holes in our rules that we never knew existed. They turned our own assumptions into weapons against us. Ambassador Kethra's voice was barely a whisper. "What did you do?" "We tried one more time," Yolmesh said. "We created a scenario with no rules at all. We wanted to see what humans would do when there were no constraints, no limitations, no expectations." The Arbiter paused. "That was when we discovered something far more frightening than human warfare. We discovered human diplomacy." The archive shifted again. The new recording showed a fleet of warships so vast that they filled the screen from edge to edge. The Valith Concordat, one of the oldest military powers in the galaxy, had assembled every ship they owned. 12,000 vessels. 40 million soldiers. Enough firepower to crack planets. They were pointing all of it at Earth. The Velith were not a cruel species. They were simply very, very certain that they were right about everything. Their society was built on absolute hierarchy. Every citizen knew their place. Every role was defined. Every behavior was prescribed by tradition stretching. Back 20,000 years, they had decided that humanity was a threat to galactic order. The tournament incidents had proven that humans did not respect rules. The Krethfall incident had proven that humans did not respect power. Something had to be done. The formal declaration of war was delivered with perfect ceremony. Every protocol was followed. Every tradition was honored. The Velith gave humanity 60 standard days to surrender unconditionally. The Galactic Council watched with dread. This was no tournament game. This was real war. Total war. The kind that had not been seen in centuries. They expected blood. They expected destruction. They expected the end of human civilization. They did not expect Diana Okonkwo. She was 67 years old. She had white hair that she kept in a neat bun. She wore simple clothes and comfortable shoes. She had spent most of her life as a teacher. Then as a counselor. Then as what humans called a conflict resolution specialist. She arrived at the Velith command ship in a single shuttle, alone, unarmed, carrying nothing but a small bag and a data tablet. The Velith High Commander was named Yelther. He was a veteran of 100 campaigns. His scales were marked with the scars of countless battles. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. He looked at this small, soft human with something between contempt and confusion. "You are their champion," he asked. "You are what humanity sends to face the greatest military force in the galaxy." Ambassador Okonkwo smiled. It was a warm smile, the kind that made people feel comfortable despite themselves. "I'm not a champion," she said. "I'm just someone who likes to understand things. And I've been trying very hard to understand your people, Commander. I think I finally do." She sat down without being invited. She pulled out her data tablet and placed it on the table between them. "Your society is fascinating," she said. "Truly remarkable. 20,000 years of unbroken tradition. Every citizen knowing exactly who they are and what they're supposed to do. It must be very comforting having that certainty." Yelther's eyes narrowed. "You mock us." "No," Okonkwo said. "I admire you. I mean that sincerely. Humans have never managed to build something so stable. We keep changing, keep questioning, keep tearing things down, and building them back up. It's exhausting, honestly. Sometimes I look at a society like yours and I feel ... envious." She paused. Her expression shifted to something softer, something almost sad. But I also notice things, she continued. I notice that your suicide rate has increased by 400% over the last 3 centuries. I notice that your birth rate has been declining for just as long. I notice that your youngest generation has a word that your oldest generation never used, a word that your translators struggled to render in other languages. She looked at the data tablet. The closest translation is solemnity, a feeling that something is missing, a sense that life has lost its meaning. Your children are dying inside, Commander, and your traditions have no cure for it. Yelter was very still. His officers exchanged glances. How do you know this? He asked. Public records, Okonkwo said. News archives. Academic studies. Everything I needed was freely available. I just looked. I paid attention. I asked questions. She smiled again. Humans are very good at asking questions. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the stars gleamed cold and distant. Your society has a structural flaw, she said quietly. It's not anyone's fault. It's just what happens when a system becomes too rigid. When every person knows exactly what they're supposed to be, they stop asking what they want to be. And that question, Commander, is the only thing that makes life worth living. She turned back to face him. I'm not here to threaten you. I'm not here to negotiate a surrender. I'm here to offer you something much more valuable. What? Yelthor asked. His voice was rough. Help, Okonkwo said. We can help you. Not with weapons or technology. With ideas. With ways of thinking. With the one thing humans have that your people have forgotten how to do. She leaned forward. We can teach you how to change. The War Council lasted for hours. Then it lasted for days. Then it became something else entirely, something that had no name in Velith tradition. Ambassador Okonkwo did not argue. She did not demand. She asked questions. Endless questions. Why do you organize your families this way? What happens to citizens who don't fit their assigned roles? What do your children dream about? What do your elders regret? The questions were simple. The answers were complicated. And in the process of answering, Eveleth began to see their own society through new eyes. They did not like everything they saw. The first reforms were small. A new counseling program for young people experiencing solemnity. A relaxation of certain dress codes. Permission for citizens to pursue hobbies outside their assigned roles. Then the reforms grew larger. New paths for citizens who wanted to change careers. Support systems for families who wanted to structure themselves differently. Open discussions about traditions that no longer served their original purpose. Within 6 months, the war had been forgotten. The Velith were too busy rebuilding their society to think about conquest. Their military was voluntarily reorganizing into what they called a collective wellness initiative. Their declaration of war was formally withdrawn and replaced with a request for ongoing human consultation. Diana Okonkwo stayed on their homeworld for 2 years. She trained counselors. She established exchange programs. She helped them write new laws that protected individual choice while preserving community bonds. When she finally left, the Velith gave her a title that had never been given to an outsider before. They called her Mother of Questions. It was the highest honor their culture could bestow. The recording showed the final scene. Diana Okonkwo boarding her shuttle. Surrounded by Velith citizens who had come to see her off, many of them were crying. Some were holding signs with messages of gratitude. Children were waving. She waved back, smiling that warm smile, and then she was gone. The recording ended. In the council chamber, Ambassador Kethra found himself struggling to understand what he had just witnessed. She ended a war, he said slowly. A war with 12,000 ships, 40 million soldiers. She ended it by talking. High Arbiter Yolmish's light flickered with something that might have been weary resignation. She did more than end a war, the Arbiter said. She transformed an enemy into an ally. She rewrote 20,000 years of cultural tradition. She did it without firing a single shot, without threatening a single life, without even raising her voice. She won a war by making the enemy realize they were already losing, not to her, to themselves. And then she offered to help them win against their true opponent. Kethra shook his head. But this is wonderful. This is what we should want. Peace without destruction. Resolution without death. Why would this lead to banning humans from warfare? The Arbiter's light dimmed to almost nothing. Because, Ambassador, we realized what this meant. We realized that if humans could do this to the Velith, they could do it to anyone. They could look at any society and find its weaknesses. They could ask questions that no one wanted answered. They could show us truths about ourselves that we had spent millennia hiding. Yolmesh's voice dropped to a whisper. Humans do not fight wars the way we understand them. They do not seek to destroy enemies. They seek to transform them. And transformation, Ambassador, is far more terrifying than destruction. Because when you are destroyed, at least you know who you were. When you are transformed, you become something new, something you might not recognize. The chamber was silent. An emergency session was called, Yolmesh continued. 700 species voted. The resolution was unanimous. Humans were to be permanently banned from all galactic warfare. Not because they were too dangerous, because they were too effective. Because if we let them participate within a century, there would be no more wars at all. Only humans and their ever-expanding circle of confused, grateful, transformed friends. Ambassador Kethra sat in silence for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he asked the question that everyone was thinking. They did not develop these methods against us. How did they learn them? Where did humans get these abilities? The Arbiter's light flickered with something that might have been ancient fear, that Yolmesh said, is the real reason they are banned. And I am not sure you are ready to hear it. High Arbiter Yolmesh dismissed all but the senior ambassadors. The great chamber emptied slowly, hundreds of delegates filing out in silence. Only 12 remained when the doors finally sealed. Ambassador Kethra looked at his fellow seniors. They represented the oldest and most powerful species in the galaxy. Between them, they had witnessed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. They had seen things that would drive lesser minds to madness. They all looked afraid. What I am about to show you, Yolmesh said, is classified at the highest level of galactic security. It has never been shared outside this chamber. It will never be recorded in any archive. You will carry this knowledge to your deaths, and you will never speak of it to anyone. The remaining ambassadors nodded. Whatever this was, they needed to know. The Arbiter activated a final recording. But this one was not from any galactic archive. It was from Earth, from human history. When we banned humanity, Yolmesh said, we asked ourselves the same question you asked. How did they develop these abilities? Where did they learn to fight like this? To think like this? To win like this? The recording began to play. It showed images from human history. Ancient images. Primitive images. Wars fought with swords and spears. Cities burning. Armies clashing. We researched their past, Yolmesh continued. We've studied their conflicts. And we discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about them. The images shifted. More wars. Different eras. Different weapons. But the same pattern, repeating again and again. Humans have been fighting each other for their entire existence as a species. 10,000 years of continuous warfare. Hundreds of thousands of conflicts. Billions of deaths. Kethra watched the parade of violence with growing unease. His own species had fought wars. All species had. But this was different. This was relentless. This was endless. Every tactic they used against us, Yolmesh said, they developed against themselves. The boarding actions. Humans have been capturing enemy ships for thousands of years. The psychological warfare? They have entire academic fields devoted to manipulating minds. The economic attacks. They crash their own economies dozens of times through deliberate manipulation. The cultural transformation. They have changed each other's societies so many times that they barely remember what they used to be. The recording showed a human child. She was perhaps 6 years old, sitting at a table with a game board in front of her. Across from her was an AI system created by the thought forms of Keth, a machine designed to play strategy games at the highest possible level. The game began. The AI moved first, following optimal patterns calculated across millions of possibilities. The child moved second. Her move made no sense. The AI adjusted its strategy. The child made another impossible move. Then another. She was not playing to win by the AI's definition. She was changing what winning meant. 20 minutes later, the AI forfeited. Not because it was losing, because it could not understand what game they were playing anymore. This is every human, Yolmish said, from birth. They are not taught to fight. They are taught to refuse constraints, to question everything, to find the gaps in every system and exploit them. To them, there is no such thing as an unwinnable scenario. Only a scenario where they have not yet discovered the correct kind of winning. Kethra stared at the frozen image of the child. She was smiling the same smile Commander Chen had worn, the same smile Ambassador Okonkwo had worn. A smile that said, "I know something you do not." "We did not ban humanity from galactic war to protect ourselves from them," Yolmesh said. "We banned them to protect the very concept of war from becoming meaningless." The Arbiter's light flickered and shifted. Consider what would happen if humans participated fully in galactic affairs. Every conflict would become an opportunity for them to demonstrate new tactics. Every enemy would become a potential convert. Every war would end with humanity having more allies than before. Within a century, there would be no more wars. Not because we had achieved peace, but because humanity would have made warfare obsolete. They would have found ways to win that we never imagined. They would have asked questions that shattered our assumptions. They would have transformed us all into something new. Kethra spoke slowly, carefully. "You banned them because they are too good at making peace." Yolmesh's light dimmed with exhaustion that seemed to span millennia. "We banned them because they achieve peace through methods that make traditional warfare look sane. Insanity, Ambassador, is the only thing holding this galaxy together." The Arbiter moved to the center of the chamber. "Every species in this room has fought wars. We have all killed. We have all conquered. But we understand war. We know its rules. We know its limits. We know when to stop. Humans do not stop. They do not recognize limits. They look at a problem, and they solve it, no matter how many traditions they must break, no matter how many assumptions they must shatter, no matter how many minds they must change. And they consider the survival of their enemies to be optional to the solution." Kethra thought about what he had seen. The Krethful incident. The tournament games. The Valith transformation. Each victory more complete than the last. Each method more creative, more unexpected, more impossible. What would happen, he asked quietly, if we simply befriended them? If we accepted them as they are? Yolmesh's light flickered with something that might have been dark amusement. That is exactly what they want. And that is exactly why we must be careful. Because once you become friends with humans, you start to see the galaxy the way they see it. You start to question things you never questioned before. You start to change in ways you cannot predict. The Arbiter paused. The Velith are different now. Happier, perhaps. But also unstable, uncertain. They are asking questions their ancestors never asked. They are becoming something new. And they are grateful to the humans who transformed them. In 50 years, the Velith will be unrecognizable. In 100 years, they will be more human than Velith. And they will thank humanity for it every step of the way. The chamber was silent. The senior ambassadors looked at each other with expressions that mixed fear and fascination. Finally, Kethra spoke.
So we're not
banning them from war. We are banning them from changing us, as Yolmesh said. We are preserving who we are. We are protecting our traditions, our cultures, our ways of life. We are choosing stability over transformation. Kethra thought about this for a long moment. But change comes regardless, he said. Nothing stays the same forever. If we do not change, we stagnate. We die slowly instead of living quickly. The Arbiter's light flickered. That is a very human thing to say, Ambassador. Kethra clicked his mandibles in what might have been a laugh. Perhaps it is. Perhaps that is the real danger. Not that humans will attack us or trick us or manipulate us, but that they will make us ask questions we were comfortable never asking. They will show us possibilities we were happy never seeing. He stood up and looked at the frozen image of the smiling child. They are not banned because they are dangerous, he said. They are banned because they are contagious. Spend too much time with humans, and you start thinking like them. And once you start thinking like them, he did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Outside the chamber, beyond the crystal walls, the galaxy continued its ancient dance. Stars were born and died. Species rose and fell. Wars were fought and won and lost. And on a small blue planet, in a small cafe, in a city called Lagos, Ambassador Diana Okonkwo finished her tea and checked her messages. Another species had reached out, curious about human ways. They wanted to understand. They wanted to learn. They wanted to change. She smiled that warm smile and began to pack her bag. One more journey. One more conversation. One more chance to ask questions that would reshape a civilization. The galaxy had banned humanity from war, but it had never occurred to them to ban humans from winning. And humans, Diana knew, always found a way to win. Not through violence. Not through destruction. Through something far more powerful. Through the simple act of asking, what if things could be different? She picked up her bag, walked out of the cafe, and headed for the spaceport. The stars were waiting, and she had so many questions still to ask. Far away, in the great chamber of the Galactic Council, High Arbiter Yulmesh watched the human ambassador's shuttle lift off through a long-range sensor feed. The Arbiter's light flickered with something that might have been resignation. We cannot stop them, Yulmesh said quietly, to no one in particular. We can only slow them down. And perhaps in the end, that is all we can hope for. The shuttle disappeared into the stars. And somewhere in the galaxy, another species was about to learn why. Humanity had been banned from war. They were about to learn that the most dangerous weapon in the universe was not a gun or a bomb or a fleet of warships. It was a question, and humans had an endless supply.